Now, another point that they bring up is the high levels of divorce. Now, their thinking is, why would we even marry women when most marriages end up with divorce, when they end up with women taking half of the guy's money, and so forth and so forth. Well, once again, we need to think of what has changed over the past few decades. Why are divorce rates so high? Well, because women have been granted more autonomy. So back in the day, even if your great-grandmother was in a very unhappy marriage with your great-grandfather, it was very unlikely that she would actually leave him. This is because our great-grandmothers didn't have access to their own resources, right? It was pretty rare for our great-grandmothers to have their own jobs, to have their own savings account, to have their own plan Bs and Cs. So why are there higher levels of divorce now? Well, because women do have plan B. They do have savings account. They are actually caring about the well-being of the relationship rather than just sticking it out for life. So I don't think that divorce has become more common just because relationships have become more conflict-ridden, but it has to do with so many things. And a lot of the times, when we're thinking of the 1800s and the 1900s, women stuck around with men because they had no other option. They had nothing else to do. They couldn't go and get a job and rent their own apartment and figure out life on their own. They were basically stuck. So to say that, oh, the divorce rates, point to something alarming, it's the woman to blame. Well, think about it. Once again, it takes two to tango. A lot of times people divorce because of affairs, which are committed by both men and women, or they're just, their divorces happen because people just have different interests. They find out that they were a lot more different than they had anticipated. They want different things in life. They grow apart. So there's a lot more here than just women to blame. Now,
Yep, so you've said a lot there, and again, very simplistic. I don't think you're really qualified to talk about the 1800s and 1900s and what kept men together and women together in those days. Okay, so setting all of that aside, the divorce rate. So more than 2/3 of marriages today fail, and that's a statistic you can look up, okay? So from a MGTOW point of view, is the vast majority of relationships are dysfunctional. Right? And in my opinion, all relationships in the West are dysfunctional, and it's like that. I'm prepared to discuss it with you, but it's just part of the Western culture. So 2/3 of marriages fail. So why take the chance? From a MGTOW point of view, it's the logical decision is not to partake in a legal contract that is likely to be broken. It makes sense in every other context of life. So, marriage should be one of the big decisions in life, and you expect the contract to fail. Because marriage is a contract, it's a legally binding contract, which is why you have to go to divorce court to get a divorce. So it's marriage is just not an option for MGTOW.
The reason that this is so problematic to me is that I feel like these men are basically digging themselves in a hole. Now, when we think of men isolating themselves, I tend to immediately think about suicidal behavior. Look at the men who have committed suicide in the past. It tends to be men who have isolated themselves from everyone, whether it be men, women, friends, family. And so just this process of MGTOW, men going their own way, wanting to separate themselves, tells me that these men are just running from their problems instead of figuring out kind of the source of their angst, why women are so triggering for them. Instead of going to therapy, instead of working on themselves, instead of doing things to better themselves, they're basically just blocking out women altogether and saying, oh, life is better over here without women. That is a lie. And sooner than later, you're going to realize how lonely, how incredibly depressing life can be. And this...
Yeah, okay, I'm going to have to stop you here again. I think what we're seeing here is you projecting your own insecurities onto MGTOW. Okay, so MGTOW are not digging a hole. Okay, MGTOW, like I say, turning their backs on Western women and walking off into a glorious future, in my opinion. I've never been happier in my life, and I know lots of men who, once they've got rid of the women in their lives, they are just content, happy, fulfilled. They're living an excellent existence on their own. And I've got to admit, most of them still have sex with women, but it's on a casual basis mainly. So sometimes it's a contractual basis. But no, MGTOW aren't digging a hole. Now, as far as suicide goes, male suicide is an issue that's not addressed in mainstream societies. But if you actually look at the causes of suicide, it's generally economic or sort of an emotional cause. Like if you look at, for example, at the moment, there's suicide rate is high amongst farmers in India, and they're getting forced to buy seeds from DuPont or Monsanto. I think it's Monsanto, with the genetically modified seeds, and of course that bankrupts them over time, and they kill themselves. In Australia, there's farmers killing themselves because their farms go under. They lose their farms. So male suicide, yeah, it's an issue, but it's got nothing to do with MGTOW. In that decision to go MGTOW is not. It's a lifestyle, and it's a great lifestyle.
This has to do with both sexes. I personally grew up in a female household. It was me, my mom, and my sister. My parents were divorced, so my dad did not live with us. Not having a masculine energy around was not a positive force in my life. It was a negative force. And I think that everyone, whether you're man, woman, trans, it doesn't matter your orientation, we both need access to both feminine energy and masculine energy. And if we completely block out one energy over the other, we are going to suffer so many consequences. So let's talk about some of the effects of having an excess of masculine energy. This is also known as the wounded masculine. So just like there's a wounded feminine energy, let's say you were rejected, or let's say you experienced some sort of abuse as a child, women tend to form dependencies where they're super needy, they need a lot of attention. That's what happens when we have a wounded feminine energy. Well, let's talk about wounded masculine energy, because that is what all of these men are going to end up struggling with. So in a wounded masculine energy, we find men who are too intense, too serious. They get angry very easily. They don't have much balance in their life. They tend to abuse their power by being overly aggressive, overly violent, overly controlling. They tend to be very competitive, very critical, very confrontational, and just overall avoidant and unstable. So do any of these traits sound like something that's going to help these men? No, it's actually going to hinder them and push them deeper down in this dark hole. So
okay, so I'll probably let you ramble on there a bit longer than necessary, but look, energy is E equals mc squared, right? So energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And to gender energy is just wishy-washy crap to me. You go on about wounded masculine, wounded feminine. It's all like, it sounds like it might be meaningful, but I none of that wounded masculine stuff that you put up there applies to any of the men I know who are MGTOW. Okay, there's like, and to say that men going their own way is in some way controlling of others, or aggressive to others. I mean, what you're actually saying there, almost it can be said not to apply to MGTOW. How can a man saying, I'm going to go my own way, focus on my own self to become a better, more in tune with myself, more at one with the world around me, like really bettering yourself on financial, emotional, intellectual level, personal level. How can that in some way be evidence of the wounded masculine with all that stuff that you just put on the screen? I see all of this as just projection from you and some sort of personal issues that you have onto the MGTOW movement. I don't understand where you can equate any of that masculine, wounded masculine stuff with MGTOW. You obviously don't know what you're talking about here.
So whatever this cult-like membership is trying to accomplish, I think unfortunately they are going to get the opposite effects. We